Welcome to the Passion Purpose Power podcast. I'm your host, Ames. I am a neurodivergent, fat, queer counsellor, coach, and clinical supervisor. I hope that you find this podcast uplifting, honest, and very human as I introduce you to people who have changed their lives and who are also changing the lives of others. I hope that this podcast and the people that you meet here help you feel more connected and part of the Passion Purpose Power community. Marianne Oakes is a Manchester United supporting serial entrepreneur, musician, counsellor, parent, grandparent, and trans woman. Marianne is passionate about getting every ounce of joy out of life and through her counselling work, helping others to find a way to live their best lives. Marianne grew up during a significant time in LGBT history, living through the legislation of gay male relationships in 1967, the AIDS crisis and the legislation of gay marriage, and the Gender Recognition Act. Marianne found a way to explore her own gender against a hostile but changing background and found a way to not only survive but thoroughly thrive. Marianne loves spending time with her family and finds joy in her musical pursuits as a guitarist and has a thriving practice as a therapist supporting trans clients as well as anyone who wants to help find some clarity and ways to live a full life.
Marianne, thank you so much for agreeing to come on the podcast. It's really good to have you here. How are you doing?
I'm doing well. Thank you for asking me. Obviously, it's nice to do these things, but it's also nice to catch up with somebody who I've known for a few years now and we've not spoke for a while. So thank you for considering me.
We'll try and avoid turning it into a big catch-up session, although I would love to do that. So for anyone listening, Marianne and I worked together for about 3-4 years maybe, and Marianne's been my counselling kind of manager, supervisor type person, someone to go to with all of my worries and concerns, and has been so supportive. But I wanted to have her on the podcast because you've got a lot of intersecting interests to me. So there's the counselling, the mental health, there's gender, I guess a little bit of activism in there, and music. So we have got these sort of areas of matching interests. So but let's start with the passion question. So what are you passionate about? It doesn't have to be just one thing, but what kind of gets you excited? What are you interested in? What are you passionate about?
Big question, but I mean, and I don't want to sound patronizing to all the listeners, but life itself and getting every ounce of enjoyment that I can out of it, despite the challenges that I face in doing that. But I think as a counsellor and working with people, whatever we do when we're working with people, I think counselling is really to get them functioning and live their full lives, live their best lives. And we can talk about the trans stuff, but I think that's counselling in general. And so my passion is, like you just said, I've got all these, it's interesting when you said it, all these different facets of my identity and actually accommodating all of them into my life. So I would say that's my passion. I hope that kind of answers that question.
No, I love that. So living, passionate about living, giving space to all of those things. And of course, you're a parent, you're a grandparent, you've got dogs, you like to travel. So how, maybe this is too big a question, but how do you make space for all of the things in your life?
So, I mean, one thing I do have to say there as well, I'm also an entrepreneur, or, my history has been entrepreneur. I've not always been the most successful business person, but I've never stopped trying. It doesn't matter how many times I've been knocked down, got this need. How do I fit it all in? Difficult. One of the main things is having a partner that kind of supports me in doing all of these things. And as I would always say, I can't speak for Vicky, and I know at times it can be challenging having me, doing all this stuff, but never once has Vicky tried to hold me back, and has only ever, supported me in all my endeavours. So I think anybody that is trying to live a full life in the way we've just described, you definitely need support around you in order to do it. I definitely couldn't do it if I was on my own, without a shadow of a doubt. But you've also got to remember that a lot of it interplays. You know, my music is what I do for self-care. And being a counsellor, you've got to practice self-care. I do read books, but I'm very slow and very choosy about what I read. So it's not, I don't have a go-to to go and read a book. Or I think in this day and age, you know, I don't avoid politics. I've got kind of a skin in the game, so to speak, but I don't kind of use it as a go-to for any kind of reason. But I think making everything interplay in your life and be part of your identity is really important. When it comes to the music, for example, half an hour a day I play, and I do my gigs, and we don't rehearse as a band. We just say we're going to learn that song, and we're all a bit long in the tooth now. We just come together. The counselling's what I do. You know, that's my day job. When it comes to grandkids, if I've got one regret at the moment, I probably work too much and don't have enough time to spend as much time with them as I could. But I am 61 and I've got to have an eye on retirement so that actually in the next few years I can start and slow down. And the whole point of the exercise is to be able to be there when I'm more able to give them more of me. I'm not a natural carer in terms of, you know, I may be a trans woman, but I'm not a baby person. I'm not somebody that's great with nappies, although I do my bit. But I also know when they start to want to learn music, or they want to go to football, or they want to start and do other things, that I'm going to be there for them and being able to create the time. So it all kind of interplays. It isn't finding time, it's actually remembering that this is equally valid. You know, just because I'm not playing the guitar, I don't stop being a musician. I don't, when I get some time, not pick my guitar up. I'm hoping that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. And you said counselling is something you do. So it feels, I mean, a lot of people that are counsellors, it does kind of become an identity, a descriptor of who they are, not what they do. Do you kind of connect with that at all, or is it something you are able to kind of separate out a little bit? It's different from identity.
I think it's something that all counsellors should think about. I mean, it's very easy to get absorbed, and being a counsellor is a profession. And it's a bit like, you know, a solicitor is not always a solicitor. A doctor isn't always a doctor. A policeman is off duty. You don't, you know, if we've got, interestingly enough, a policeman that's a neighbour, but if something was happening around here, we wouldn't run round to his house. We'd still call 999, wouldn't we?
Sure.
And I do think there's something about boundaries as well, because, and again, I don't know what your experience is, Amy, but if I go on a social occasion and people want to start sharing their work with me, their troubles and issues with me, you know, I have to cut it off very quickly because I'm not there to do that. So I think we have to be able to be something more than the job that we do. Although it is a part of my identity, but it's got to be boundaried. I think that's the word I was looking for. We've got to set boundaries with that. Otherwise, we can go and we can burn out.
Yes. Yeah, that sounds like it. Yeah, it's a recipe for overwhelm and burnout if you can't separate that out.
It's a big issue though within counselling as well, burnout. You know, and if you live in a very monolith kind of life where you don't switch off and you can't practice self-care, then, you know, you've got to question your ability to do your job properly. The same as anybody, the same as any profession, I suppose.
Yeah.
But it is a balancing act without a shadow of a doubt.
Yes. Yeah. I think, and I hope that comes across sort of loud and clear, is that, you know, the work that we do as therapists is intense and there's a lot to hold when we're holding the trauma of other people. And so if you don't have boundaries, then yeah, it can easily become overwhelming.
Yes. I remember this sounds really pithy once, but I remember walking past the local bookies and seeing my solicitor come out, and somehow I was disappointed. I don't know why, but I see them as a professional. I don't see them as a person. And I've no right to be disappointed, but it did. And I do think when I say about setting professional boundaries, as you probably know, the one sacrifice I've had to make is I've separated myself from my own community. I've distanced myself from my own community. Where I used to go for support, I can't go there anymore because I don't know who's going to come and see me. And and to set that professional boundary is that on one hand, and I did a postgrad diploma with Pink Therapy, and it talked about boundaries a lot, especially, let's just say you were into kink, and on one hand you're a therapist, but on the other hand you're going into the kink community, you might end up coming across your clients, and how would you manage that? So, but I made a decision when I started practicing, I was doing my training, to just distance myself. I do go, and I will go to events, and I will talk to people, but not in the context of being a counsellor. But I won't befriend too many people, not because I don't like them or any other reason, but I don't know where they connect to my clients down the line. And a bit like the solicitor coming out, the bookies, I am human, I have got frailties, and I've got, so I've kind of put that distance in there, just to protect everybody, really.
Yeah. And that's probably another thing that would never have occurred to sort of anyone listening to this podcast that's not in the therapy world, that we've got to think about the links with that, especially when we're within small communities, whether it's LGBTQ, whether it's small cultural communities. There are lots of intersecting links sometimes that I guess the reason why we would put those, why we might remove ourselves from those spaces, or why we might put those boundaries in, is because we can't really counsel people that we've got those links with. They don't get as good a counselling as perhaps they would with someone that wasn't in that community, if that makes sense.
And to put this into context, I say my community, I'm really talking about the trans community, because overwhelmingly my clients are trans. But I think at the last census, there was about 100,000 trans people in the UK. And if you've only got to go onto social media, and all the main protagonists are somewhere connected to them 100,000 people. And, when we talk about 6 degrees of separation, we're no more than 6 connections away from any world event. If you think about the trans community in the UK being that tiny, I don't know who I'm talking to and where them links are. So it's about them feeling safe, that I'm not gonna, or they're going to say something about somebody in the community, or say something about the community. So holding them boundaries is really challenging. So the more I can I just say distance, I'm not away from it, and I'm watching it, and I'll dip in when I need to, but I'm not, nobody, if anybody thinks I'm a trans right activist, I'm a trans advocate. To when people are giving misinformation out, I will go and try and redress the balance. But I'm not an activist. I'm not going on marches or anything, because there's only so much I can do for my community, and I could become overwhelmed if I wasn't careful.
There's sort of like a crossroads there. Is we could go down that road or that road.
Where would you like to go? You go where your gut tells you.
Well, I suppose my gut was, in the last census, 100,000 trans people ticked the trans box on the census. We know there's probably more that didn't, but given that there's such a small number of trans people, which seems disproportionately out of what's the word, out of proportion to the anti-trans rhetoric and certainly some of the stuff that's come out of the Tory party conference this week, what are your thoughts on that? I'm not sure if there was a question in there.
I think the challenge, I'm always of the mind, as somebody who's long in the tooth and has been around a long time, to put this into perspective. When I was born, it was still illegal for men to have a relationship with each other. And actually, you know, in extreme circumstances, they will be put in prison or chemically castrated. So the culture I was born into, you know, was a million miles away from where we are here. And I'm not going to say as a young child, I remember, you know, the political struggles of the gay rights movement, because it just didn't happen in my area. But on reflection, when they reformed gay rights bill, where it allowed men to have relationships, it passed by one vote. That's how close it. So there was still a massive amount of politicians who thought one man should not love another man, and it passed by one vote. And revolutionary as that was, it was still close. And then we had the AIDS crisis, which wasn't, if you look at it, and you know, in a space of time, it wasn't that far away. And that didn't go through without a fight, did it? You know, I remember Margaret Thatcher putting it's heartbreaking, honestly. I can get emotional thinking about it. Putting billboards up, demonizing gay men, and call it, you know, it was the scourge of God and all of that. And the way they were treated, you've only got to watch It's a Sin, you know, to see, you know, and I don't think you could write a drama about that could over-egg it, you know, that. So it would be naive to think we were going to advance trans rights without this current rhetoric. And, you know, to hear Rishi Sunak stand on that podium and laugh mockingly while gender ideology, we're not going to be bullied. We're not going to be bullied, says the bully. Do you know what I mean? Yeah. Nobody's bullying anyone. It's like in Oliver. Oh, I'm off on one now, Amy. It's like in Oliver when they go and ask for more food. Do you know what I mean? It's that. That's how it feels being trans. Yeah. But I'm philosophical about it to a degree, that maybe that this is wrong as it might be. Maybe it's the rite of passage of all movements that are about social change to have to go through this. And it's horrible and it's terrible, but I'd also say there's only one thing worse than what we're experiencing now, and that's to be ignored and be invisible. And that's where we were for most of my life. Yeah. And yeah, we have stuck our heads up above the parapet and we are being shot at, but it's still a better place to be than I remember in the 90s when I first started stepping outside the front door, if somebody had punched me, I'd have been arrested for breach of the peace. Yeah. And we're not there now. No. And we've got to fight to keep moving forward. And I think we are moving forward. And the more we move forward, the more the rhetoric turns up. Yeah. But we've got to keep going. We cannot keep going. Yeah. Does that make sense? We've got to keep that going. And painful as it is, we've got a whole generation, generations of people coming behind us that need us to do this. So I think I'm philosophical about it. I hate it, I'm angry, and I feel sorry for everyone I speak to, but I can only do what I do. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's almost like that you have hope. You have hope that it is moving in the right direction, almost because it's so tough, and that's part of movement.
Yeah, I think no pain, no gain. Sometimes I don't want to. We've got to be really careful. I want to make the distinction. I'm not trivializing it. I feel it. You know, I could have thrown my mug at the telly when I heard Rishi Sunak say that. You know, I'm angry and I'm furious, but I need to be, because it's that's going to make the change.
Yeah.
And I do know that it's coming. It's it'll fade into obscurity like it did with gay rights. There's still, let's not kid ourselves, there's still homophobia, transphobia, racism, misogyny is baked into the fabric of society. And that's not saying that everybody feels that way, but even me and you could have a conversation long enough and I could say something and you would be jarred by it, not because I'm a bad person, but because actually I've not given that one bit of detail enough thought. And I don't mean to, but you know, it was baked into society, and you don't just kind of have enlightenment and then everything's okay. You've got to kind of, this comes back to my passion about life though.
Yeah.
And as you can see, I'm quite animated talking about it because that's where the passion is.
Yeah.
Passion doesn't mean to say everything has to be easy, does it? Or happy. It can mean that you've got something that fires you up.
Yes.
And I think that's really important.
That's exactly it. It's a passion is an energetic word. It sort of, it implies kind of movement, and that can sometimes be rage and anger, as well as, you know, something you're joyfully excited about. I think there's two things that I've heard in the last sort of week that have made me aware of what I didn't know, and I guess wanting to share it in case someone else doesn't know. As I had this conversation with my mum the other night after I'd heard it, and I don't want to imply or compare things that shouldn't be compared, but I'd heard someone talking about in the context of what's happening, the rhetoric against trans people, particularly against trans women. To be clear, it doesn't really seem to have the same energy around trans men. But in Germany, when Hitler first got started, how, you know, the percentage of people that were Jewish in Germany at that time was less than 1%. And I had no idea that it was that low. So that's on me for not knowing. But I think it's just that when I asked my mum, she said 35%. And I was like, yeah, you would imagine that that's what it would be. So that was you know, the context in which I heard it was sort of comparing, you know, trans people to the Holocaust. And so I know, I get that there's some incomparable things there. But there's this, it's just in the context of the rhetoric that our politicians are putting out there. They're spending a lot of time and energy and being very vocal about less than 1% of the population. And I just think, what are you, while they're doing that, what are you not paying attention to that they don't want you to be looking at?
If you think about it in real terms, the Tory party and the Labour Party are gambling that 1% will make no difference to a general election. So it's an easy target. And what disappoints me more than anything is the Labour Party, who's always been the voice of the people. Politicians are there to serve and protect all citizens without exception. And what both them parties are doing are playing politics with trans people. We'll tell, you know, we will not... we won't defend trans people because who cares? But what they forget is the thing that changed, and this is my perspective, so I'm going to own this. I'm not going to pretend that I speak for everybody that was involved. When you looked at the gay rights movement, it's when people started seeing that this was their partner, their child, their granddad, their... You know, when suddenly people, so that 1% spreads very, very quickly. And they're taking a gamble that our families and friends won't support us. I'm going to give you a little bit of information now. You put out, you liked that Facebook poster put about Brianna Gay.
Yeah.
And if you look on the people, when I looked this morning, the only people that had liked it, the only two cis people were you and an old colleague of yours. I don't know if I should mention her name, but you were the only two cis people that have liked it or, you know, acknowledged it. And I'm just like, where are all my friends?
Yeah.
Where have my friends not read that? If I went on there and said, oh, here I am with my grandchild, they'd all pile on with that.
Yeah.
And that's what we've got to motivate. We've got to let people see that when they attack trans people, they're actually attacking me. Yeah, I'm a confident person. I don't follow the rules of everybody else. You know, I live my life on my terms. People like me for it. Hopefully, some people hate me for it, probably. But when they talk about trans women, they are talking about me. It's a bit like people I've got a black friend.
Yeah.
And when we hear about, you know, when people are being racist, say, yeah, but that's not them. We don't mean my friend because they're one of the nice ones, you know. So what we need to do is mobilize our allies. They've got to start and see that when Rishi Sunak's talking about trans women, he's talking about me. And you said about it is trans women, but you've got to remember that misogyny continues at a pace, even within the trans community, that trans men are still being, the fact that they're not included in this debate, they are on the periphery and brought in when it suits their needs. They are being silenced, as women have been silenced all their lives. And, you know, it's a double insult to every trans man that's existing to be ignored, to be, you don't matter, you know, we're not frightened of you because you're women. It's the trans women. So that misogyny extends into this debate very, very subtly. Do you know when I said it's baked into the fabric of society? It's these subtleties. Do you know trans men have advanced the rights of trans people equally, if not more, than trans women? Sorry, trans women out there, if you've got the stats to tell me otherwise. But if you have, we're still not acknowledging the trans men who have done equally as much. And people like Stephen Whittle come to my mind, who lots of people won't have heard of Stephen Whittle. He's been around years fighting for my rights. So, misogyny.
It's so important. And I think that's why allyship is important. I often wonder, what am I doing? Is it enough? And had Victoria on a podcast episode, and it's not gone out yet, but we were talking about how to be a good ally. And I think what you just said there was really important, because so I take my mum is entering into this podcast more than I realized, but you take my mum for an example. I'm fairly sure she doesn't know a trans person in real life, but she's the mother of a daughter who does know trans people and has worked with a lot of trans people and is very passionate about trans rights. So that has impacted on her, and she'll ask me questions and she'll listen to these podcast episodes and she'll share that with people. So I think this is the thing about allyship to some degree, is if you're being vocal, even if it's just sharing a post on Facebook, even if it's just liking a post on Facebook, other people are watching that and seeing that, and so if they're in a situation where they're thinking, well, it doesn't really matter to me because I don't love anybody that is trans on a personal level, they then might go, oh, but so and so know someone, and actually that person over there, their partner is trans, or their cousin is, or something like that. I think that's where it starts to go out in ripples that you don't know.
It is like it's getting the momentum going enough, and we don't need, all we need is 30% of the population to care.
Yeah.
But the politicians will stop.
Yeah.
We're not looking for 70% of the population. Enough. We probably only need 15%, to be honest, spread out across the UK to care. Politicians will stop. And when the politician stops, the media will stop. And then your likes of J.K. Rowling will stop. You know, there is an underbelly here that we've got to remember. There's a bit that's out of sight that's going on that's far greater than all of that. Corporates globally know that it's in their interest to support trans people.
Yeah.
You know, all the big brands now, you know, capitalist society and all that, and wherever you stand on all of that, the pink pound has got a massive value to these businesses. You know, even people like Tesco, they do need that 1% because they're high turnover, low profit. And if 1% of their market left, it would have an impact on their bottom line.
Right. So
actually, there's a lot of good happening, even if you don't like corporates. I don't want to get into that whole thing because I've got lots, but you know what I mean? And that, you know, a lot of brands are associating themselves with trans rights, and then you've only got to look at J.K. Rowling and her brand's damaged by it, by her stance, and maybe she doesn't care about that. Maybe she's got enough money to have the privilege to not care.
Yeah.
But there are people suffering in her organization because of her stance. And that's what will drive change. I'm hoping that makes sense.
Yeah, that's definitely another really important facet of it. Okay, let's jump to purpose. So with passion and purpose is both kind of connected terms, but do you feel like you have a purpose? Do you feel like you have a purpose that is definable, that is, and is it different to your passion?
I suppose I think professionally it depends. I suppose when I'm a musician and I go up on stage and play, I want people to have a good night. I mean, the band that I play with is all about audience participation. If you book us for a party, that people go away from that party. You know, let's just say I was booked to play somebody's. Well, we did a 21st recently, and I want everybody to remember that 21st for the person, not for me.
Yeah.
You know, so my purpose is to go in and make a difference. If I'm just playing in a pub, that people think, what a great night we had down at that pub. Not what a great night did we have watching the band, but we had a great night. So my purpose, I suppose, is to make a mark somewhere, whether that's for me or whether that's for my community or whether it's for the people that come and watch the band, whether it's for my family. So I suppose the passion and the purpose kind of, there's an interplay there, isn't there? That you know, what is the point of any exercise? And that's got to be to make a difference. And you know, if most people thought about that in their lives, how can I make a difference today? You know, you go into work, how can I make a difference? And I know you'll say doctors and nurses, and they go in there, and because that's part of the training, the same with counsellors. But you know, everyday people that are just going serving in a shop, did they help that old person? You know, was the purpose purely to earn the money and go home? Or was it to actually enjoy the day and actually make a difference? I'm going to just give you a little fact about me. When I used to commute to work, you know, which I've done for most of my life, if there's different routes to take to get there, I wouldn't choose the shortest route. I'd choose different routes so that I could enjoy the trip. If I go on the train, if I go on a flight, I do everything I can to enjoy it, not just see it as a I don't know, a means to an end. So purpose is put purpose to everything, I suppose.
Yeah, that's really interesting. So I guess what you described there was with the music, a facilitation of a good time and you know, making a difference. And I suppose that's there in the therapy as well, of facilitating a change, a growth, something like that, and then just being really present in your life gives you purpose.
Yeah. I think it's very easy to just exist without purpose. I think, with social media, with your iPhone, and I'm not having a go at them. I've got it. I said to you before, I've been on Twitter today, and God knows why I go on Twitter, but I do. But we've all got the gadgets, but the purpose shouldn't be to isolate ourselves and just entertain ourselves. The purpose has got to be to have a full life, to learn and go out and take that learning and help other people. And I suppose you're going to get people we're in a very divided nation at the moment. We've all got a different idea of what that purpose might be, but I think if your purpose is to hurt people, then you've got to question your purpose. If your purpose is to enhance the lives of the masses in some kind of way, then maybe you're doing something right. And going on to politics, I do believe genuinely that there's some really good politicians that genuinely care.
Yeah.
And they go into it for all the right reasons. And then you've got them career politicians that it's all about power. You know what I mean? And if and control. So I don't know. Does that answer the question?
I think so. Yeah, I think so. I think that's a really good point. I think in everybody that I've spoken to on the podcast so far, and it wasn't by design, but I guess it kind of makes sense that the people that I'm having on are like-minded, but there's definitely an element of I guess at a point realizing that what's most fulfilling is giving out rather than keeping in, and
yeah,
I think that's what we don't see with politicians, though the career politicians. It's a closing up rather than an open community type feeling.
Nobody's interested in the good politicians, are they? Because it's not controversial. It doesn't I mean, I must admit, and please, the listener, don't judge me for this. We've got a Tory MP in my area. I'm never going to vote for the Tories in my area. Never have done, never will do. He's actually quite a good politician.
Right.
Now, some people would say to me, well, surely you should vote for him then. I can't risk another Tory government because whatever happens, there's rot within the Tory party. And I feel sorry for the genuine good ones. And there are some good Tories. And, I'm not blinded by that. I think the ethos and everything that goes behind them doesn't fit with my values. But that doesn't mean to say that they're wrong. And they're there trying to fulfill a purpose, and isn't that all any of us are trying to do?
Yeah.
And if we are, that's all any of us should be trying to do.
Yeah. That's a really good point. And a good reminder. I wish I could say the same about my local Tory politicians, but I can't. I really wish that was the case. But I guess, there has to be space for anyone within any kind of political arena to be good, to want good for people.
Would it not be fair to say that we need a degree of discourse in politics or in any walk of life to get the best result?
Yes.
That ultimately, if we just had one group of people with one philosophy, and this is the trouble when you've got such a large majority in Parliament, that's what we've had for the last 4 years, that without the discourse, without somebody being able to challenge it, that we've got a dictatorship, and that's never good. And that's what we need to be about.
I've said this recently that according to the sort of proportional representation and people that are sort of arguing for that, if we had like I guess one however they would do it, if we had proportional representation, the Tories would never get in. And I don't want that either. I don't want, because if there's no competition, if there's no discourse, then it's a dictatorship. But I don't want to live in a country where a party can get 100% of the power for only 44% of the national votes. That doesn't make sense either. And I'd love it if we could have some really out of the box thinking. And I heard the Finnish government have an amazing kind of way of doing it over there, but maybe there's issues there as well.
What we've got missing in this country is a constitution. That's all.
Right.
And if we had a constitution that, it doesn't matter who gets in power, these are the red lines you cannot cross. They're not even up for debate. The NHS, do you know what I mean? Infrastructure. You know, that Parliament must work towards a functioning infrastructure, a functioning NHS.
Right.
Gosh, I should be on question time, shouldn't I? That's what we should have over it. And we haven't got a constitution. We've got an unofficial constitution, but we haven't got a constitution. And that makes everything up for debate. And depending on the media, and that's why, people like Rupert Murdoch wield such influence, because he can write anything he wants to serve his own purpose. And I think that's why trans people are, if he said that, the constitution is that laws that are made to advance, to reduce racism, homophobia, transphobia, misogyny, ableism, whatever, that they are written into our constitution, that they are not up for debate. We should only ever talk about the advancement, never the retraction of.
Right.
Then we wouldn't be having these kind of discourses. And you'd think we live in a civilized society where that, and then in 50 years' time, none of that will be baked into our society. Oh, talking like I know, who knows? But that's how.
We need people with visionary ideas, and because at the moment, both it seems like the Conservatives and Labour are maintaining the status quo, and we just go backwards and forwards like a ping pong ball to the whims and wills of those two parties.
The fact that people can't tell the difference says everything we need to know, doesn't it? And sadly, I liked Jeremy Corbyn to a degree, but I also kind of felt, the pendulum was swinging too far to the left. And I don't want to say I'm a centrist, but there's a reason why we have centre of politics, because that is looking after all the nation. And when they swing too far, we ignore people. And that the idea of government is to look after everybody and bring equity into society. And sadly, we don't have that now. And what was the third thing, by the way, Amy? Sorry,
yes, that's okay. I was gonna ask. Well, we've talked a little bit about power. We haven't sort of specifically said it out loud as a word, but we have talked about it in various aspects of what we've talked about. But when do you feel at your most powerful?
I would say it's when I know that I have a way of seeing things differently, and I only know this because it's reflected back to me all the time. It was reflected back to me in the therapy room, but I sometimes see some people ranting on about this, that, or the other, and I'll say, oh, well, have you thought about this? This is socially, and suddenly you see the wind taken out of the sails. I think if I was to take my 61 years on this earth, to be here, so as somebody who's been married for 40 years, last year I have to say, somebody whose marriage has survived transition, somebody who's confident in my identities, and I will play with my gender role to suit my needs without hurting anybody else, or purely for the purpose of advancing people's enjoyment or life in a meaningful way. That I'm also open-minded enough to know that not everybody wants to be married for 40 years to the same person. That I would, it might not have been my way of being, but I would fight for it to be their right of way. Not, I don't try to impose my way of being. So I think my power, when I feel at my most power, is when my mind's open to see things differently. And it doesn't mean to say I always get it right. And I can look a fool, but I'd rather look a fool and learn than to have a narrow, rigid view of what the world should be. And that links, I think, into what we said right at the start, my passions.
Yeah, it's amazing how that all links together. And what a great way of putting it. So you're at your most powerful, in a way, I suppose, as an accumulation of everything you've learned, everything you've gone through, allows you to be, and you are very good at doing this because you've done it with me before, and you'll often start by saying, let me just reframe that for you. And it's brilliant, it's so good. And so when you're able to get someone to think about something differently, or allow them to sort of feel heard, or like you said, take the wind out of their sails, that it can make you feel powerful.
Yeah, and obviously I have to, and you'll know as well as I do, you can't be a counsellor without having an open mind, but also you've also got to understand, like I said to you, I also know that something will be unwittingly tapped into my, ingrained racism, homophobia, transphobia, because them ingredients will be in there, but not to get. I always remember a comedian. I can't think of his name, but I think his parents, or one of his parents, is Chinese, and he's faced racism. And he was talking on a show once. He said what he finds, and he said it as a joke, really, but it's true. He said, it's interesting when I point out to somebody that what they've just said is racist, how angry they get at me. I'm not racist. When somebody says to you that they're vegan, people get angry at it. Like them saying they're vegan is a judgment on you. And yeah, I can get defensive in the moment, but I'm also able to reflect on why am I being defensive? Maybe I am wrong. And it's okay to be wrong. And, this open mind, if we want to maintain an open mind and not have rigid thought processes, we can adapt to the world, we can adapt to social change. And yeah, I can be frightened, I can be persuaded in the wrong direction, but not being fixed in that, without being persuaded that actually that's hurting people, or that's not going to advance society, and that it was okay for punk rockers to swear on television despite my Catholic upbringing. You know what I mean? So yeah, I don't know if people class that as a power, but that's when I feel most powerful, when I can change and adapt.
Yeah, and that's so interesting, because it's almost the antithesis of, and this is probably a baked into the culture of politics that I wish could change, is change and adaptability, because we often see it's never done in good faith, and sometimes the changes aren't particularly good or helpful. But we often berate politicians for making a U-turn and, changing their minds. And I've always kind of said, like, wouldn't it be great if we just had someone that went on and said, with this new information, I have changed my mind and X, Y, Z. Whereas they double down on stuff because they're almost not allowed to change their minds. And so I think sometimes we've created a system by which then
I think there's two viewpoints. I agree with you entirely. However, there's a slight difference there in are they changing their mind because there was a drop in the polls? Or are they changing their mind because they've seen the light?
Yeah.
And I think when we talk about U-turns, and I do think people, it's very easy. I suppose as a counsellor, it's very easy for me to talk about these kind of things. I do sometimes think, at the top, we do need people with clear vision. What they've got to be able to do is adjust. I mean, to throw billions at HS2 and then say it's not going to, I mean, you're going to get fast rail to Birmingham from London. You can drive it almost as quick as you can. By the time you've got a cab to the station or whatever, you know, that's not a U-turn. That's, you know, we've made mistake after mistake after mistake. If people could have been open-minded, what was the purpose of the exercise? And sometimes politicians are making policy statements based on polls, not on what's right.
Agreed.
And I think a politician that could say, you know, all my life I've believed in these values, but now I can see how they're harming people, and I'm going to have to rethink. I think that would be a different kind of, and we need more of that as well, you know.
No, good to point that out. We have to stop, but I think we should probably do a part 2 and 3 because we could probably talk about everything for much longer. Thank you so much for agreeing to come on, and it's so exciting to me because you never know where it's going to go, and we've covered all sorts of things. So thank you so much for being up for the adventure.
Well, you're welcome. Thank you for asking me. You know where I am if you want to do a part 2 on another series, perhaps.
We'll have to plan it, like book you in months in advance so that we can actually get to see each other, because otherwise you're too busy.
Well, we have tried, haven't we? It's our calendars don't seem to match somewhere. So, like I say, you know where I am, and I'd love to talk about some of this more. And if anybody does read in and want to comment and want to know more about any aspect of it, or try and change my mind, I mean, keep it respectful. But you know, I would love people to challenge me, because, you know, how am I going to learn if I'm not challenged? This is where I am today. You know, hopefully by the time I'm 71, there will be more expansion on everything that I've just said. So
we're growing and changing, and I've sort of shifted my tagline for the podcast to community through conversation, and I think that's all I want it to be about, is just having community through conversation. and that's what we've done today. So thank you so much.
You're welcome.
If you enjoyed this podcast, please don't forget to like, subscribe, and share it with your podcast-loving friends. Please come and find me on social media. I would love to connect with you there. And if you would like to support this podcast and keep it free from ads for as long as possible, you can send me a tip on Ko-Fi using the link in the description. This podcast was produced by Lexi Thurston at Digital Hero, and the music was created by Walters Music Production.